So today the difference between the loops we did last day and today is going to be, I want to focus on what a nested loop looks like to you. With image processing, it's a pretty common loop to run. It's a loop within a loop. You can do this in many, many levels. So it's possible if you look at some of the contest problems for high school students, you'll see that you probably would get like, oh geez, it might even go 4 or 5 deep, like a loop within a loop within a loop within a loop. But for now, we're just going to go to a depth of 2 or a single nested loop. And I'm going to start by showing you how to make an actor get darker and lighter. We'll do both. So the first thing we should do is go and get the documentation for the color class. And then I'm going to write a method in here for the actor. So this ant, it doesn't matter, your code could be the same for any image that was there. But that's what I'm going to do is I'm going to write the first method to darken this actor. And later we'll write a method, it's very similar to lighten it, but so what I'm going to make use of here is I can take a color and make it darker. And there's also a method, I believe, to make it lighter. No, that's okay. We can make our own. But if you remember from a little bit of the color theory that we did, when you have an RGB color, then 0, 0, 0, that was no color, so that's black. So when you want to darken an image slowly and fade it to black, that means you're decrementing each component of red, green, blue until you hit 0. If you wanted to make it lighter, you go the opposite way. Your RGB would be 255, 255, 255, and that's where you get white, where you wash the whole thing out white. So that's just a little bit of color theory that's going to be going on behind the scenes, but we can use the color class for that. I'm also going to want to pull up and show you how we're going to do this in Greenfoot. I can ask an image, and that's what I'm going to grab here. So this one will get me the color at a particular pixel location. So all I'm going to do is get the pixel, darken the pixel, and then set it back using this method, and then go to the next pixel, get it, make it darker, draw it back. And I'm going to keep doing this over and over until the entire image has been darkened. Okay, so here's what it would look like. First, what I'm going to do is start a loop that's going to go for the width of this entire image. So for this actor, I would need to know its width. I'm going to use that image too, so I'll save it. And I also am going to need to know its height. Otherwise, I won't know how far to change the pixels. And what I'm going to do is start up in the top left corner of the actor, and then I'm going to loop through all the way down to the bottom right corner. Now, one thing that's a little bit strange about Greenfoot is all of the sprites are defined by their center. Generally, they're defined by the top left corner. So there might be some rounding errors in this code, but the top left X is supposed to be the, for the image anyways, that should still be true. Yes, so 0, 0 is the top left corner of the image for Greenfoot. So that's where I'm going to start. So I'll call this starting position, let's call this the row that I'm on. and I will go as long as the row is less than the height of this image. So for example, when I ask for the height, if it tells me this is 10 pixels tall, you can think of that as having 10 rows of pixels that it's going to be using. And similarly, the column is equivalent to which row, which spot in the width I'm on. So if it was 8 pixels wide, you'd have 8 columns of pixels. So what this is a loop within a loop, and this is going to start on a row and then loop through every column in that row. So I'll show you real quick what it would look like to you. So here's what it does. I'll use this to show you what Java's doing in the loop. It's going to say, let's do a 5 by 7 image, just to make it tractable in the time here. So this is 5 wide and 7 tall, or 5 columns and 7 rows. So the loop will start at 0, and it will go to the first row at the very beginning, and keep moving through all of its columns. So what happens is it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns. Then, when that loop is done, it's going to go to the next row and start the whole process again. So go down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it'll do this 7 times until it's completed the entire image. So that's how it would traverse through the pixels, by saying, give me a row, I'll check all the columns. Go to the next row, check all those columns. Go to the next row, check all those columns. So that's how you could write this as a nested loop. And the process was, as I described, to get the color, make it darker. So I'm going to need the Java color class. Otherwise, Greenfoot won't know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about colors. So color, so I'm going to ask this image to get, and I believe the language we saw was color at. So get color at. And the x's correspond to those columns. And the y's would correspond to the rows, because they go up and down. So get the color at the column and the row that I'm on right now. And then I'll say current pixel is equal to a darker version of itself. Then I'll draw it back on the image. Maybe just for good measure, I'll say darker is the darker version of that pixel. That way my code's a little bit more readable. So I'm going to get the current pixel, make it darker, and then set it back on the image. So when it's done, it'll have looped through every pixel, making it darker. And then all I have to remember to do here is update that image on the screen. So we can have a look and see what happens. And the way I'll do it so you can visualize it is that's what I'm going to put in the act method now for this ant. So up here, I'll just say darken. Yeah, that's the name of my image. So darken, every time act is called, my ant should get darker and darker. Fingers crossed. Oops, wrong method name. Let me just set color at XY color. What did I write? Set color, not set pixel. All right, so I'm going to put loopy into the world again, and hopefully we see the ant getting darker as I run it. Oh, Of course, it was so fast. Maybe I need to slow down the Greenfoot animation, that I didn't have much time to see it run. So let's try about there. That's a little better of an animation. The other thing to keep in mind is the ant is quite dark, so why don't I'll set the image to be something that's lighter, and then that way at least, let's see here. The alligator is a pretty bright green. Why don't we try that instead? So there you go. Every time it acts, it's getting darker till it hits black. So this is one of the reasons that nested loops are used heavily in image processing, because that's a pretty standard loop of going through all your pixels. Now, I'm going to also show you some ways of doing the back to the 1990s console, like we did the other day, of printing stuff out. So this should give you some idea of, if you wanted to process an image in Greenfoot, where you might do that. But I'm going to back up a second here and go back to the console screen. Okay? So I'm going to show you a couple of methods that'll help you think about the exercises I've given you. The first one I'm going to do is I'm going to call this, let's call this a mirrored triangle. And I'll draw it for you so you can see what it's going to do. And we'll talk about how do you predict where these loops come in. Where's the repetition involved? So this is what I want my method to do. Maybe I'll use dollar signs just so it's easier for you to see. So oops. So this is example, this would be mirrored triangle 4. That's what I would like it to do. So what you have to get used to separating out is what is the repeated task here. So what I see is two things. And again, this comes with some experience, but what I see is first I draw some spaces, then I draw some dollar signs. Then I go to the next row where I draw some spaces and I draw some dollar signs. Draw some spaces, draw some dollar signs. Now here you might be thinking, uh-oh, but the pattern breaks down. You're still drawing spaces, it just so happens you're drawing 0 spaces. So we'll figure out how do we make this go with the loops of repeating this pattern. And the first thing I would notice is I see that if I ask for a triangle of height 4, I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4 drawing calls. Repeating the drawing happens 4 times. So that tells me what my outer loop should be. Whoops. So this loop is going to repeat that drawing a line. And I'll give you a couple strategies when you do this. First thing we'll do is a nested loop, and then I'll show you how you could also separate this task. So the first thing I'll do is make myself a comment. And we need to figure this out. So how many spaces I draw in this first line here? There's 3 spaces. How can I predict that? Well, the triangle is height 4. So on the first line, there's 3 spaces. If I had a triangle of height 10, I would have 9 spaces. If I had a triangle of height 50, I'd have 49 spaces because I only draw one dollar sign. So the amount of spaces I'm going to get here is whatever the height is minus 1. But that's just for the first row. So I have to think about it the next time. What happens is I have 2. And then I have 1, and then 0. So every time I draw the spaces, I go 1 less. So how would I capture that? Well, some of you might like doing it this way. Whatever row I'm on, that tells me how many I would need to take away. So height minus the row minus 1, that's the math formula that tells me this row is row 4. So it's going to be let's see here. There should be a 0. So I've got 4 minus, actually I'll label it so we can talk about it a little bit easier. So here's the values for the row that I'm on. I guess in my code it's n. So here, the spaces is 4 minus 0 minus 1, which is a 3. So yep, that works. Here the spaces would be 4 minus 1 minus 1, which is 2. Spaces is 4 minus 2 minus 1. So this is doing the correct amount of spaces for me, and I'm using that variable n to help me calculate it. Okay. So then I'll write a loop to print those out for me. And that's just to call this system.out.print a space. Okay. Then the next loop I need to do is draw the dollar signs. So if I have a triangle of height 4, that means every row has 4 characters. It's a difference between spaces and dollar signs. So what I'm going to do is use that fact to help me figure out how many dollars I need. So what I'm going to do is, on this first row, if I had 3 spaces, there's only 1 dollar sign left. So I could call this $1 sign, $2 signs, $3 signs, and $4 signs. One more than the row that I'm working on right now. So now I can write my loop. And print off a dollar sign. And when those are done, I just have to tell the console to go to the next line. So this is a fair challenge. If you were a beginning programmer on loops, your exercises are a little easier, but this should give you some kind of a programming pattern to help learn from and help modify it as you look at your exercises. But we can compile this and ask our loopy here to draw it for us. So I'll say, give me a mirrored triangle of height 8. And the console should pop up for you. Oops. And I've done it here. I've got an infinite loop, so I'm going to have to pay more attention to how I code it for you guys. Let's see if I can dig up my error here quickly. Oh, so here's my subtle error, which again is probably something that the names, using good names should help you avoid. But what I did was I kept incrementing how many dollars I wanted to print, so it never ever caught up. It just kept printing. So I meant to say dollar, but that kind of goofed me up. So, there's another reason maybe I didn't use the best names between dollar and dollars, right? Okay. So hopefully, let's see. There we go. That's what I wanted to see. So now I've got that triangle happening like I said. It'll produce it with a nested loop. Okay? So I'm going to do one more for you just so that you can again, follow my lead on some of those nested loops. And this time I'm going to do a step pyramid. So I'll give you an example of what a step pyramid would look like. So if I said step pyramid and I wanted you to draw at height 3 and the step height is 2, this is what I would like to see from you. So if the height is 2, that means each layer has a block of 2 on it, and the total pyramid's height is 3. There's 1, 2, and then 3 layers to this step pyramid. Okay. So the loop that'll accomplish this for us would look like this. I have to think about what's being repeated is drawing the triangle at that height. So if I had height 3, I would call on this 1, 2, 3 times to draw that block. Okay. So int, I'll call it h for height, while h is less than the height. And each time it'll get incremented. I'm going to do a slightly different technique here, which is I could just go and jump right in with loops. But another thing you can do to help break this down is you can write another helper method. So I'm going to call this public void block. And you give me the width. And you give me the height. And that's going to do this single task for me of drawing that. And what you'll notice is there is this lead up amount of space on each row. So if I don't have that space there, then my step pyramid would look like this. And it would be sort of an angled pyramid, which is fine, but in this case, I'm going to show you how to do it with the lead up space. So the first thing I'd have to do is draw the lead up space. Okay, so that'll be system.out.print a space. Then I have to draw the stars. And the stars is given by the width of this block. So there's 2 in my case. So I'll now use that to draw a star. And so far, I'm able to draw one of my lines. But what I haven't done is I need to repeat that for the given height. So if I know I'm doing a repetition, that's how I know I have another loop coming. So here what I'm going to do instead is keep track of how much of this block I've drawn. So all I'm going to do is repeat that space and stars pattern. In this case, the height, in this case, the step height is 2, so it repeats itself twice. And that's what this loop will do for me, is repeat the space and stars. So in here I'll call my method, which is block, and I have to figure out how much lead up do I need. That's one of the things I need to know, as well as what's the width, and the step height is given here. So that much I know. If I've got 3 parameters, I have to fill in these spaces. The step height is the one that goes into this height. So I know right away I can just say use the step height to do that. But let's see if we can figure out what pattern would give me the width and the lead amount of space. So for example, there's 1, 2 spaces, there's 1 space, and then there's no spaces. So if I start with a height of 3, that means I'm going to pad it with 2 spaces. If I started with a height of 10, I would pad it with 9 spaces. So the amount of lead up space that I need to give this is going to be the height minus 1. So that's again the first part. I'll then take away the spot I'm on, so that this time I only have 1, and this time I will have no lead up. And then finally what I need to know is what's the width of the block? How could I predict that it was a 2, a 4, and a 6? So these are the even numbers. So how many I want to draw, if I'm on the value of h, let's go like this then. If I start at 1, actually makes this a little easier to work with. Oops. So here the value of h should be a 1, a 2, and a 3. So the amount of spaces is 3 minus 3. There's none here. Then 3 minus 2, there's going to be 1 here. 3 minus 1, there would be 2. And how many stars is double wherever I'm at currently in the pyramid. So even though I didn't nest the loop here, I used a helper method which did have a nested loop to draw the rest of it. Okay. Now keep in mind that the examples I'm giving you, again, I tried to give you ones which are quite a bit simpler, but I'm trying to give you guys the programming pattern for writing nested loops so you can play around with my code. Let's go have a look and see if I can get my step pyramid. So I'm going to make that example and see if it prints the way I hoped. Forgot to separate the lines. Okay, so it drew my pyramid all on one line for me. I guess I'm not the best at talking and coding at the same time. So let's go 3 and 2. So there's my, I guess I don't know how to clear this terminal. I'll run it again. It's because the old code is still there. So my step pyramid 3, 2 should give us a better separation. There it is. Okay. So I have some nested loops for you to try as well. I will post this code for you to look through as you work on your own exercises.